let's start with what's happened over the past 4 or 5 days. Well, the biggest story right now is that supposed members of Venezuelan gangs were loaded onto 3 planes that were going to El Salvador. So it wasn't deporting them back to Venezuela. It was deporting them to a third country. Let's first start with what you know about those people, because there's been multiple stories now about these Venezuelans that indicate at least some of them are not any members of gangs, and we have no evidence of any of them being members of gangs.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. I'm reading those same stories and seeing, what I've seen for years and years when it comes to immigration enforcement. Immigration enforcement agencies like to make claims, not always substantiated and sometimes sensational, about who they're arresting, detaining, and deporting, because they know that most people wouldn't like the reality that they are, detaining and deporting asylum seekers, detaining mothers and children in family detention, things like that. So they like to, tell the story of the dangerous criminals, even when it's not true. And yeah, we see cases now of these Venezuelans being deported, essentially back to an authoritarian country and a big gulag, one of the biggest prisons, if not the biggest prisons in the world. And some of these individuals are asylum seekers who were themselves, fleeing persecution, fleeing potential violence. And one of them, at least one of them, had an upcoming asylum hearing, which is just wild if you imagine, United States, someone coming to the United States, a country that, claims to be safe and, place in the world and a city on the hill, and we arrest them, throw them in prison, and deport them not even to their home country. It's just a wild development.
Is there any type of process why is there no process for this? It does not seem like there's any process to substantiate these claims, because it seems like that ICE could just pick up anybody and put them on a plane.
They sure could. And in fact, they've arrested several U.S. citizens and held U.S. citizens, in the country now. So they could. I think there's 2 issues with the current situation. The first is the government's not being transparent about what is really happening and who they're arresting and deporting. That's one major issue. They could, by the way, they could release more information to the public about what their information says. They've not only have they refused to provide the American public with more information, but they're now openly defying even providing a federal judge in a case that they are a part of information about what's going on. So that is a major red flag, but they claim that they're able to do it. We'll see if this really holds up, because the president has invoked this tremendously rare law called the Alien Enemies Act, which hasn't been used more than 3 times in our history, always during moments of declared war, even then under very worrying circumstances. It's what gave us Japanese internment in the 1940s, among other sort of heinous abuses of power against, not just only against immigrants, but also against U.S. citizens were held in those camps. And they're saying that that authority, combined with the designation of this gang as a, quote, terrorist organization, means that they can effectively do whatever they want, because they're claiming that it's national security. So they've really laid the foundation. They've tried to lay the legal foundation that says this is a national security issue, so no one can question us. No one can look behind the curtain. Even judges don't have the authority to question us in any way. It's very concerning. But, it's worth remembering that this is something that Donald Trump and politicians on the right have been laying this foundation for years. They've been using invasion rhetoric for years and years. They've been drumming up this idea, this misconception that this country is under some sort of immigrant invasion, and therefore the president has wartime or wartime-like authority to do whatever he needs to do. It's not legitimate. There are some legitimate concerns. It's certainly not to, public safety is a concern to everyone. That's not the same as what's happening, however.
Let's go to the question before we get to. I want to get back to this court case with Judge Boasberg, because supposedly at noon today, the DOJ was supposed to respond to his demands for more information. But before we get to the sort of the legal aspects, why El Salvador? Like what? Why not Venezuela? I mean, you can tell us. I sort of know the reason, but I mean, why El Salvador as of all places?
Well, El Salvador is very friendly to President Trump and the Trump administration because their President Bukele, has spent years cultivating relationships with that part of our political system, that part of the Republican Party. Bukele is, hired lobbyists in D.C. to help build relationships with elected officials in Washington. He's very close to Trump and close to people who are close to Trump as well. Bukele has a lot of, Bukele admires Trump and Trump's approach to politics. Frankly, Bukele also resembles and embodies a lot of Trump's approach to politics and law as well. Bukele, dismissed courts in his own country, ignored the Supreme Court of El Salvador's decisions on a variety of matters. He has, implemented this sort of criminal enforcement program, so to speak, that's rounded up thousands and thousands and thousands of people with very little due process, if any, and put them in this maximum security facility that's, by my estimate, 2 or 3 times as large as Rikers in New York City. I mean, it's a huge facility. It can hold up to 40,000 people. Really enormous facility. And that's how he's been running his own country. And, with Trump in power, much like the private detention contractors that make money off of immigrant detention, Bukele has also put himself in the situation to make millions of dollars off of holding immigrants for President Trump as well. So it's really important for people to understand just how much work Bukele has put into this relationship to make sure that he is in the right place at the right time for himself. But also, he's made his country and his government effectively a convenient carceral state for the Trump administration. So it's very worrying. And I think it's important to remember that, once Trump gets individuals out of the United States and into another country, into another, prison abroad somewhere, it's just very, very difficult for the U.S. courts and the U.S. legal system to get them back. So it's like Guantanamo, but it's even further removed from Guantanamo Bay and the regulations, even that Guantanamo Bay has faced. And one of the reasons Guantanamo Bay has not grown as much as the Trump administration was like, because of budgetary limits and regulatory limits and things like that, none of that's going to apply in El Salvador.
So
I just want to ask just really quickly that it's been described as a penal colony. Can you just explain why that's the case?
Sure. So it's described as a penal colony because Bukele's approach to, quote unquote, public safety and the use of police powers within his country are essentially extra legal. He's gone above and beyond the rule of law in El Salvador to arrest and detain indefinitely tens of thousands of people in that country. Some of them are criminals. Some of them are members of gangs. Very many, we know, are not. They were just in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time, caught up by police. And again, with little or no recourse at all for families to get them out, for attorneys to see their clients. So Bukele really has turned El Salvador, I think, into a kind of penal colony or a kind of carceral state, at the national level.
How much of it is also sort of like from the perspective of the Trump administration, a private prison? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, what is? I don't have evidence of this. I don't even have direct speculation about how Bukele is literally making money from this. But this is a crypto. He's deep into the crypto world. They have adopted Bitcoin as their currency. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he has any meme coins like the president. But what is your sense of, we can see what the give is. What's the get on his end?
Sure. So from pure numbers, I mean, this is a $6 million deal right now. This is a deal that's already in place that Bukele's getting for holding people in his country at this maximum security facility. And let's not forget that immigrants who are in, even if immigrants are in the country unlawfully, that's a civil, unlawful presence is a civil offense, and immigrant detention is usually civil detention. So throwing many of these people who don't have criminal histories in a maximum security facility, very concerning. But so $6 million is the current bottom line. I think that if this goes well and Trump can keep doing it, I think Bukele can expect more contracts, more agreements that come with financial incentives. And, Bukele has also admitted, by the way, that it's very expensive to run this maximum security facility. So this money from the Trump administration is going to help float some of the budgetary issues that Bukele has with his, with his massive police state that he's running. But on the longer term as well, I think it's probably not just about Trump. It's probably a lot about Elon Musk. Bukele is very tech forward. He has a real tech bro kind of attitude and disposition. He likes that stuff. It's not, it's Bitcoin. It's also a lot of other technologies. And so I think, I think what we'll see is it's not just about immigration, not just about detention, but I think we'll probably see a closer relationship also with Elon Musk. Maybe this will be one of those places where Musk decides to invest money in some way because he sees some kind of potential there. So I do think Bukele is banking on the idea that this is a good, not just good politics, but good, financial decision for him. And, why not? If Musk is willing to throw money at it, and if Trump is willing to throw money at it, why wouldn't he do this?
All right. And just staying on this one specific case, because there's other cases where they have now, including Khalil and this doctor from Brown who was deported because supposedly she
had sympathetic photos on her phone to Hezbollah is the claim.
But we'll get to that in a second. This court case that I guess it was on Friday, when U.S. District Judge James Boasberg ordered the administration, maybe I guess it was on Saturday, to halt these planes. And the Trump administration has sort of like bobbed and weaved as to why they didn't do it. At first they said, well, the planes are in the air, they're in international waters, and therefore I guess doesn't apply. It's gone rogue, which is a very novel legal theory. Then they claimed, it was too late. But there have been now dockets that have shown that they lied about that. The Judge Boasberg said today at noon, what did he require of the DOJ? And we should just say, Trump last night subsequently called for his impeachment. And just about 10 minutes ago, John Roberts came out with a pretty rare statement.
Wow.
Saying that for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. Roberts put out this statement, which I guess, all things considered, is probably, at least a positive in this sea of not positive things. But what is the judge saying here? Like what the administration is invoking the Illegal Aliens Act, or the
the Alien Enemies Act. Yep.
Alien Enemies Act. And like you say, it's only been invoked 3 times: War of 1812, World War I, World War II. People will notice the pattern there of the word war in there. I made the point yesterday, it wasn't even invoked in the wake of 9/11, when we had sleeper cells that were in the country to commit that terror attack. The idea of invoking that would have been absurd. Are you aware of any legal rulings on this that create a criteria for the legitimacy of invoking that act? And then secondarily, like, what is this judge asking for of the U.S. government?
Sure. I mean, I'm not an expert on the Alien Enemies Act. At the same time, I've read the law, I've read the case, I've read a lot of analysis of both. I just can't see a scenario where this is a legitimate invocation of that act in any way. It's very concerning in that way. But the real point here is that the Trump administration, whether it's the Alien Enemies Act or some of his other legal strategies that they've used, the Trump administration is trying to get around the courts. He's trying to get around accountability and oversight of any kind. It's very concerning. It's not the first time. I'm sure it won't be the last. But what the judge is really getting, what this case is about, is saying, is questioning the legitimacy of the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. And the Department of Justice is showing up, in court, making claims, as you said, which are, contradictory. They're openly defying the judge's request for information, claiming national security, but not actually, substantiating that in any way. And what the judge,
when you say claiming national security, they're saying there are secret reasons why we have this to believe. And the judge is saying, okay, well, you need to tell me them. I promise not to tell anybody, but to go forward, I need to know.
Right. And to be very specific about it, literally, if you look at the timeline and you look at the timeline, if you look at the timeline of flights and you look at the timeline of court filings and court interactions, planes are taking off at the same time that the Department of Justice is fighting with this judge. It's so important to understand this timeline because the Trump administration knows this is going to be challenged. And their decision is deport first, ask questions later. Get people out of the country so that the judge doesn't have a reach, or we can argue that he doesn't have a reach. So planes are taking off. The judge is saying, you've got to stay. He's telling the Trump administration in court, you've got to stop. And they say, oh, well, you haven't written it on a piece of paper yet, so we don't have to follow your order. First of all, that's not how it works. And then the judge is coming back and saying, hey, I told you couldn't do this. And they're saying, oh, we didn't defy your order. So he says, okay, prove it. Tell me when those flights took off. And they say, oh, we can't tell you when the flights took off because it's national security. That's what they mean by national security. It's their way of getting around just answering simple questions that a federal judge is asking them in the course of discovery. So what's going to happen today? The judge said, okay, you come back on Tuesday. I want sworn statements from all of you telling me exactly what you told me in court. Basically, the judge is saying, you're saying this when we're just having a normal conversation in a courtroom around a case. I want you to put your name on a document and submit it to me as an official filing in court that what you said is actually what you're going to stand by. The reason why this is so important, and this is so important for so many federal judges to do in the context of these attorneys in the Trump administration, is these attorneys show up to court and they make arguments and claims that any barred attorney in the country would be scared to make in federal court, at risk of losing their license, at risk of perjury, at risk of giving the court false information, false testimony. So that's what the judge is really doing here. The strategy is the judge is saying, if this is really what you want to stand by, put it to a piece of paper, because once it's on paper like that, the judge can then go back, and once we do have evidence, as is now coming out, that judge can potentially say, look, you've lied to the court, and that's going to be really dangerous for the rest of the case and for the administration, to show that Trump's attorneys are lying in court. That's potentially where this could go.
You go ahead, Sam.
I wonder if you have a sense.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're now in the realm of conjecture, but is this what is the Trump? What does the Trump administration hope to do with this? In the sense that they have promised their people to do mass deportations. Mm-hmm. Whether they defied the court in this instance or whatnot, like, this question's going to be resolved. And even if they were able to have the ability to deport people like they deported these people, and we should say, like, I got 3 stories here where at least a half a dozen people are coming out and saying, like, these guys had nothing to do with gangs.
I'll just give 3 examples that Aaron Reichlin-Melnick put out, that there was a tattoo artist seeking asylum who entered legally, who was taken to the Salvadorian prison with no due process. A teen who got a tattoo in Dallas because he thought it looked cool. A 26-year-old whose tattoos his wife says are unrelated to a gang. These are 3 people that just had tattoos that they're saying are a part of Tren de Aragua without evidence.
So, and, you know, they just deported apparently this doctor was like one of the top kidney experts in this hospital. And the hospital's like, well, you know, people are going to probably, we're going to lose patients are going to get ill. Maybe someone will die because of the absence of this doctor. Are they just looking for high profile cases of different types to try and communicate to their political base? We're doing our best. And sometimes we get through, but sometimes we get foiled by these, you know, radical communist, Marxist, robe wearing judges. Is that your sense? Like, are they geared? Like, do you see any indication that they are gearing up and have the capacity to do these mass deportations that they're talking about?
Well, not yet, but they are trying to get there. Many of us said leading up to the Trump administration that some of the main challenges is deportations are not just a matter of, a president doesn't have the political will. There's a lot of institutional and legal process that's involved in deportation. It's a complex operation under the rule of law. Now, if you want to do deportations and you want to, throw law and order to the wind and just run it like a totalitarian regime, you can do that, but you can't do that legally. So they know that there are institutional challenges. They know that there's challenges around public perception of who gets deported. Most people don't want to see, families and people who are, working in a restaurant or, fixing your house. They don't want to see those people deported. So they've got to manage perception and they've got to manage institutional limitations and legal limitations. So they're grasping at everything that they can to remove any barriers that exist, so that they can put as many people on flights, put as many people in detention centers, and kick people out of the country, no matter who they are, no matter if they're actually a public safety threat or not. It's very indiscriminate. I think that's what they're doing. They're trying to clear the field. They're rolling out test cases to see what they can get away with, to see how far they can push it, to see what will survive the courts. And at this point, we have to say whatever the timeline was on Saturday. Thomas Homan has already said. He's been asked directly on Fox News, okay, well, what happens next after all this court battle? And Thomas Homan says, more planes, more flights. So whatever happened on Saturday, we already know that Trump's border czar has said they're going to keep flying people ostensibly regardless of whatever a judge says. But I do think there's one point which is kind of important. There is some level of coordination at the top, no question. But I also think that what we're seeing with some of the people who are being deported, like the doctor who was deported flying back into Boston. One of the things that's happening is that Trump's approach to politics, he's very good at sowing confusion and sowing a lot of chaos. What that means is, we saw this during the first Trump administration, we're going to see it for the next 4 years, so we may as well just understand how the game is played. Trump will issue orders, he'll issue general kind of policy directives, and unlike a normal administration, which would sort of go through the process of figuring out, okay, how is this going to impact our regional directors? How is this going to impact frontline officers? Let's think this through. The Trump administration is not going to do that. So what that means is there's going to be a bunch of immigration enforcement officers out there at airports, at the border, arresting folks in communities. And they're
freelancing.
They're freelancing. Yeah. They're winging it because it's not as if they have all of this, clarity. They have a lot of discretion. They have a lot of power, but they're kind of just told, hey, go look for this stuff and see what you find, under threat of, being fired, being disciplined, who knows what. So I think that that's an important element of how Trump's politics and how his power work is. He's also able to sow confusion even within his own enforcement agencies.
I mean, this seems to me to be akin when Donald Rumsfeld, in regards to prisoner treatment in Afghanistan basically said, take the cuffs off. And he was talking about not of obviously the prisoners, but of the jailers and the military interrogators. And my understanding of ICE is you have a lot of these guys who basically washed out of police academies, and they're just itching. And as soon as they get the word that they're not going to be restrained, then they just go off and do whatever they want. I mean, so it's basically just unleashing the dogs, as it were.
Yeah, and you know what? If you deport someone out of the country, it's pretty hard to file a complaint against the officer who treated you that way once you're, out of the country. So they also have the nature of deportation and immigration enforcement is if you are successful in abusing your power, the person that you have, abused your power against is no longer around to file anything against you. So it's convenient for them. And immigrants end up paying the price, and their families end up paying.
It's the same dynamic as why we don't hear about the abuses in the press, is because these folks are afraid to shine a spotlight on the fact if they are, still waiting to apply for more permanent status, etc. They don't want a media attention, and that's why they can get away with. When you were last on the show, we showed some of the graphs that you have on your excellent Substack of the increase in arrests for either people with criminal histories, and then there's people with just like simple civil violations, and then people with no criminal histories except for the classification that the Trump administration is using, which is like if you cross the border, this is no longer, according to them, a civil violation like getting a parking ticket or jaywalking. This is something that makes you a criminal. And that classification at the bottom, you've shown on your site that those what you can document. The increase in those arrests is wildly outpacing the other ones and those detentions and deportations. Can you explain what's happening there and how they're able to get away with calling these people criminals when they're just not?
Sure. It's one of the simplest and oldest tricks in the political playbook. If you repeat a lie often enough, it just becomes the truth. The reality is we can look at the data. ICE could release the data to the public. I know what that data looks like. I know what they have. It's actually not hard. It would take half a day to simply show the public what's really going on. They're not doing it. And the simple truth is there aren't enough immigrants with criminal convictions in this country that they could achieve mass deportation simply by focusing on criminal. There just aren't enough people. There are some. It's not insignificant, but it's at a lower rate than U.S. citizens, and it's certainly not at the scale that would enable them to deport millions and millions of people. So what they have to do is they have to constantly represent what they're doing as if they're going after criminals. Because like I said, most people would not be motivated to support deporting families and kids and, people who are just working to make a living. Most polls show this repeatedly, and most people are just not interested. People want a path to citizenship. They want a path to legalization. But the Trump administration knows that, so they have to represent everything they're doing as if they're going after terrorists, as if they're going after serious criminals, and then what they're actually doing is just kind of going after everyone.
And just essentially labeling all those people criminals,
right?
Criminalizing, it would be the functionally, calling anybody who got a speeding ticket as like a felon on some level or a criminal. Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.